are there like serial killers out there that you think are just not connected to this stuff that you're just like, or is it impossible now to not think that they all might be in some way?
No, I'm discovering that it's no, I'm not ruling out the idea that it's possible. I'm just considering the fact that it makes far more sense how you would imagine them getting away with so many of these alleged let's say just um how could you accumulate so many victims without actually exposing yourself or overexposing yourself within that this frame of time before the authorities connect you to these murders, but it's never actually that they are the sole prime suspect from day one. Effectively, the authorities are always seemingly looking at in other directions. Like for the Atlanta child murders, it was all about this list of other potential perpetrators that was then just entirely ignored because
Hmm.
George Bush Sr. he takes a trip and he visits the governor mansion in Atlanta during the course of the trial,
Oh
and
boy.
or I mean during the course of the investigation, and
Right.
he says if you guys can't wrap this thing up, the feds are coming in, right?
Wow.
So wrap it up. And then the feds come in instantly, and then guess what? Wayne Williams becomes the number one suspect, priority. And all the list of other perpetrators is just hidden out of sight,
Hmm.
and by the way, Edmund Kemper, I had mentioned him earlier. He has direct ties, right, as far as in the army, and
He was friends
also
with the police.
apparently,
He was
dude,
friends with the police.
his yeah, and his father was in the first Special Service Force in World War II, right? In the Devil's Brigade, right? As far as
Wait, oh wow.
that
Didn't he kill his father? Did Kemper
I
kill his
now I
parents? Oh
honestly I
no,
can't remember. I think
maybe
he
he killed
definitely
his.
killed his mother, if I
Well, we
remember
definitely
correctly.
he did more
Yeah,
than that. He definitely killed
right.
her, and then did a lot
Yeah.
more. And then when he was done,
Right.
he, according to him, the narrative is like he was healed from the bloodlust after he killed and decapitated and had relations with his mother's severed
He
head.
killed his
Had
paternal
yeah.
grandparents
He
when he
killed
was
his
15
paternal grandparents. Then
That
he went
was it.
away. Then
and
he
He
came
said,
later
and
back.
killed
I
8 women.
if I remember, he had like a statement like he just wanted to know what it felt like to kill his grandma or
Yeah.
something like that.
Ooh.
Like it was really
Yeah,
weird.
dude,
But
he's insane. So like, I just want to say real quick because he's friends with the police, or he was. Um, After he did what he did to his mother, he like went on a little road trip, called the cops that he was friends with, and they all thought he was joking. They were laughing, and he said in the phone call like, "I just did this to my mom. Her head is in the trunk. I think. I think there's even a when he was on probation, his probation officer wrote him like a glowing review while he had another severed head in his trunk. And this is also like a massive man. He is huge. Uh, but he becomes a Fed basically in
oh
prison
my
because they're using him to profile other killers. And now with this
God.
theory threaded through that, are you like, okay, maybe they're not just profiling, maybe they're getting information, like the way a large language model scrapes up all the data to become its own thing. Maybe the government, and then Austin, you're making me think about this. Why maybe they astroturfed the idea of true crime into everyone's brains in the past 10
Oh my
years
God.
to, to
Stop
distract
it, bro.
us from the fact that
Right.
the government is actually Ted Bundy. That's terrifying.
Dude, I think you're onto something, brother. And by the way, he claims, that there were reopened secret bases for these guys to be trained at
Whoa.
as far as out of Fort William Henry Harrison, just outside of town. And he claims that essentially this is very strange that there's a direct connection to John Wayne Gacy through Ed Kemper. And basically it's through the JCs. All
What's
right.
that? Wait,
This
what's
is
that?
a youth organization, United States Junior Chamber
Hmm.
for future political leaders.
Oh,
That's what it's for,
great.
which is so crazy. But
Great.
it's essentially John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
He joined this group, the U.S. Junior Chamber, also known as JCs, which is a national civic group. Which, guess what? Odd coincidence. So did fellow serial killer Ed Kemper, who belonged to that group as well at the
No
time, and
way.
other very well known. And by the way, Gacy was named outstanding vice president of the Waterloo JCs in 1967. And other JCs include President Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford, Richard Nixon, Al Gore, Walter Mondale, Hubert Humphreys, Bill Gates, and Howard Hughes. Charles Lindbergh. I mean, like,
Okay. So
how
all
many?
you
And then he
all
claims that
serial
it
killers.
was he joined the JCs while he was at the Atascadero State Hospital,
What?
which in my mind is like, okay,
Mm.
this is after he killed his grandparents.
Right. Oh yeah. Okay. So because he was really young. He was a 15, right? You said 15 when he killed his
Yeah.
grandparents with
Yeah.
a rifle, I think, right?
I didn't see that part, but probably.
Man. Yeah, Bundy, people forget. Politician. Like he was in politics. I don't know if he was actually voted in politics, but he was in the political world and then just spent his days driving around in a VW bug pretending to have a limp. I spoke to someone who claims to have run away from him out of his car.
Oh my
And her
God.
story,
But
it's hard to verify this stuff, but her story is insane.
right, that is insane. But you know what really kind of stuck out to me in regard to John Wayne Gacy was also the fact that when it was basically discovered when he was apprehended and the authorities raided his property, that he was directly connected into John David Norman's pedophile ring and was helping abduct children for this very reason with Phil Paskey, who was running the Delta Project on his behalf. And there were blackmail files on local individuals held by John Wayne Gacy at his property
Mm.
whenever they effectively raided it. And so that I think is very important because again, it draws perfectly into the human compromise aspect of all of this. And I think when it comes down to the fact that even David Berkowitz, man, like
Yeah.
that was something that blew me away because I knew that Roy Cohn had these terrible. I knew he was a pedophile who abused and raped Richard Kerr from the Kinkora Boys Home.
Mm.
I know that. Roy Cohn, where's my Roy Cohn? It's just like one of the most disgusting things you could ever imagine. And by the way, he's hosting parties for human compromise in Massachusetts whenever the Son of Sam murders are being conducted, basically. And essentially, what is connected there is basically you have Roy Cohn apparently, according to David Berkowitz, the Process Church was providing children for sex at parties held by wealthy people in Westchester, Manhattan, Connecticut, and Long Island. And David Berkowitz informed Maury Terry, who wrote The Ultimate Evil,
Yeah.
that one of these parties were held at Roy Cohn's house in Connecticut.
Dude.
Two further witnesses maintained that occasionally present at these parties were a Yonkers judge, at least two Westchester County politicians, a high-ranking New York State politician, a celebrated but later murdered physician, a Nobel Prize-winning doctor, and two aides to then mayor of New York City, Abraham Beame.
I mean, I know the government is doing some of the most nefarious things. Like they are legitimately a serial killer and a mass murderer. And it becomes easier for the American people, and they know this, to digest that there's just one evil man lurking in the community. Whereas this is like an existential crisis for the world to fully understand.
Right.
And a lot of us do understand this. Like we know about Epstein. We read something like Chaos. We know there's a deep, dark web that's permeated this entire country and world. So like the Berkowitz thing is like, yeah, satanic panic, give them a face, give them their boogeyman, then it deflates when there's something much larger out there. Like, it reminds me of True Detective. The first season of True Detective, there's a boogeyman, but you come in contact with like a much larger web of evil. I love True Detective. That first season is oh man,
extraordinary, brother.
It's
honestly,
so good.
it set me on a path because man, I did an episode called The Real True Detective, and it was about um man, it was about the Hosanna Church scandal
Hmm.
was the first portion, and then I directly tied in the Delphi murders from Indiana that
Oh
occurred
wow.
in
Of course.
2017.
Koberger, right? Oh no, that's different. That's different.
Now this one was so there were two girls who were essentially went missing and their bodies were found and they were effectively arranged.
Yeah.
Their bodies had been arranged in
Right.
this very specific, what looked as if it was a neo-pagan death ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it what it actually was, because I inevitably discovered that there's a group and organization that are directly behind it, and I know the names of the perpetrators, and I know the witnesses who have named them as being there in that moment, what they did to those two girls.
Wow.
And yeah, they were a part of a neo-pagan organization called the Vinlander Group. And this neo-pagan organization was entirely infiltrated into the prison system of Indiana at the time, and I think still to this day, because the actual patsy that they are now refusing to let, provide a real defense for himself, he was entirely brought up on charges years after the fact, because they needed a patsy, and some ridiculous story about a clerk finding a note about him coming in. He volunteered to come in because he had been at the Delphi Trail, and just so happened to tell his wife, who said, "Hey, you told me you were at the trail. The authorities are asking anybody who might have seen something,
Whoa.
come in and say." And he's like, "Oh shit, okay." He goes in to volunteer this all on, out of ethical standards
Mm-hmm.
and being a moral person, and is essentially years after his statement, they bring him in because they need a patsy, and so
Of course.
it's really strange because what occurred there is so very obvious. They were using these ancient runes, as far as the Ansuts was the key ancient rune that they had carved into the
Right.
tree, which directly, if you remember, the way the bodies were staged, exactly like that first crime scene in True Detective season 1, where the girl has the antlers on her
Antlers.
head.
Yep.
Same
Tied up.
thing
Yep.
happened to this girl, man, Abby, and yeah,
Interesting.
and so antlers on the head, positioned naked.
Mm.
The other girl had her clothes removed, and then yeah, one of them was naked. The other one had the other one's clothes on. It was so strange.
Hmm.
And but again, they're positioned as the painting Odin hanging from World Tree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dude, it's so crazy. And all the members of the Vinlander group, who were entirely infiltrated into the prison system, all the prison guards were affiliated with this Odinite neo-pagan Vinlander organization, and were even wearing the patches on their prison uniforms
What?
until the attorneys for the alleged patsy, which is, his name's escaping me right now, it's driving me crazy, but either way, he was just convicted and given a ridiculous sentence.
Wow.
And yeah, and it turns out that his attorneys recognized the patch, and as soon as they recognized the patch, the prison guards removed it from their uniforms, and they no longer had the patch. But they were saying that every single conversation they had with their client while he was in prison was entirely being influenced and recorded by the prison guards. Yes, so it's
Wow.
like, and by the way, there was a federal task force who was who was directly created to investigate the Odinist ties to the crime scene.
Wow.
The Odinite ties to the crime scene, and so I forget the name of the federal agent as well, but there were 3 of them specifically who were really a part of this task force, seemingly pursuing this investigation in an ethical way with real integrity. And what effectively happens
That's
is
crazy.
this individual, who happened to be a longtime prison guard, had political ambitions. He had ran on some ridiculous anti-gun platform in Indiana, and entirely lost. Well, this guy, who's affiliated with the prison guards and the maximum facility prison there in Indiana, he just so happens to drive up to the federal building in Indiana, lob Molotov cocktails at the federal building to provoke and entice out the only good faith actor in the task force investigating the Odinite signatures of the crime scene, and then shoots him in cold blood
What?
on this outside the steps of the federal building. And then all of a sudden, directly afterward, and by the way, what happens to the shooter? He somehow, eh, throughout this firefight, gets back into his truck, goes to the nearby hospital, and gets treated for his wounds. And by the way, just after this occurs, the task force and the FBI is removed from the case. No more investigating the Delphi murders.
Is there no answer to that? Like, was there no official
They,
answer to what happened with the murders?
no, they just say that
Whoa.
this guy acted alone. He was a sick freak who just wanted to sexually abuse the girls, although he didn't sexually
Whoa.
abuse the girls. None of it makes sense.
Yeah.
And they're clearly utilizing a patsy because in my mind this organization is running it's far more deeply connected to the local political system than people are aware of. And you can't expose the fact that you have loyalties of all the prison guards in the system, you know, and
Right.
that are running the maximum facility in Indiana are all affiliated with a Vinland or Odinite group, you know, which are clearly practicing blood rituals,
Yeah. Right.
which is, you know, and by the way, there's this interesting connection there. This guy who, I'm trying to remember his name too, Anthony, uh, oh shit, um, Anthony Shots. Yeah, that was the name of his profile. It was a Snapchat profile, and basically, you look up a picture of this dude, all right, and talk about the Jimmy Savile effect, right? Where you're like, this fucking guy did it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way he's not guilty. And Anthony Shots seemingly was procuring children through Snapchat. Basically, this is the
Sheesh.
modern day version of how you abduct children and get
Yeah.
them into physical positions where you can then procure them. So, by the way, one of the accounts that he was interacting with on his Anthony Shots profile, where he's using this fake picture of a male model. He's acting as if he's living this life of luxury and has all these nice cars and he's just enticing these young girls to respond and engage with his profile. And then so he gets this profile had directly engaged with those two girls just before their abduction and deaths
Oh my
occurred.
goodness.
And it turns out that he's tied into a network where he seemingly was helping facilitate the abduction of these children by putting them into these physical positions, like meet me at this place. And so basically what had happened is one other account that he had engaged with had reported that just after, within 48 hours or 24 hours of responding and interacting with this profile, a fucking masked man showed up outside their window of their personal bedroom, right? Of just this young girl. And so again, this is just like, talk about a window into modern day you know, systematic abuse and abductions as far as this is concerning
Right.
human compromise
This is
and
the fake
human
photo.
trafficking.
The
I
one
know.
he used.
Crazy.